Welcome to the MS-Perspektive podcast. Perspective with a K, as I'm German. I'm Nele Handwerker, MS patient, patient advocate and author. I'm bringing you interviews, inspiration and information about living with multiple sclerosis and show you ways how you can positively influence the disease and make the best out of your diagnosis. On ms-perspektive.com, you will find the show notes, 11 free tips as a PDF, and lots of other information. And now the show begins.
This podcast is supported by Mid-Mission, a project of the nonprofit Hertie Foundation.
Hello and welcome to episode number 6, where I interview Tania Pilz. Tania is an MS patient who is originally from South America and has founded the International MS-Community Austria. She is a creative soul, engages in MS advocacy, and concentrates on mental health and female empowerment. And she lives in Vienna in Austria. And now the interview begins. Hello, Tania. It's a pleasure to have you today on the show and a warm welcome to Vienna.
Thank you. Hi, Nele. Thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Me too. Before we start, it would be great if you could introduce yourself to the listeners so they know who is my guest today at the show.
Yeah. So my name is Tania Pilz. I was born in Nicaragua. I grew up in Guatemala and I've been living here in Austria for the past 12 years. I'm 31 years old. I describe myself as a creative person. I have a background in communications and marketing, but my heart really beats for the creation or the creative sphere, so to say. So I really like to do things that I can create with my own hands or with my body. So I would not describe myself as someone coming from marketing, but rather a creative person. I'm also an MS patient. I have been diagnosed since 2020, and ever since my diagnosis, I am actively participating in different initiatives and advocating for diversity and inclusion of minority groups within my capabilities. And with this, I mean inclusion beyond the disability and ability spectrum, the inclusion of minority groups such as expats, international migrants, LGBT communities, and here in Austria.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. And we both met at one of these digital analog get-togethers where we were talking about helping each other when you have issues. Yes. So we actually met just a few weeks ago. It's not that long.
Yeah, not really.
Okay, so let's come to the part diagnosis and current status. When were you diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or you already told that, and what led to it?
Yeah, so basically I was officially diagnosed in 2020. What led to it was my biggest relapse so far. I was on a vacation trip with my boyfriend to Portugal, and I started feeling a lot of vertigo, and I was simply feeling dizzy and not well. We went back to the hotel, and I was having my head was spinning the whole time, and the vertigo wouldn't go. I couldn't sleep so well. I thought it was the hotel because we were staying in a very tiny hotel that wasn't a 5-star hotel, and I thought that maybe it's a hotel, but my vertigo didn't go away. We went back to Vienna after the vacation, and I developed other symptoms, numbness, tingling in my arms and legs. I also had foot drop. I couldn't walk straight. I was limping, and I was very slow, really, really slow. So when I went back to my work, I couldn't think straight, and I was very slow during my whole days there. And I decided that it was time to see a doctor because I wasn't feeling myself. That was back in 2019. And I started seeing my doctor, and it took me around 8 months to kind of have a diagnosis.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went through blood tests, lumbar punctures. I went to MRIs, and he could not, at the beginning, he had the suspicion that it was MS, but he didn't want to say it right away. So we went through the whole process. And it was only in 2020, April 2020, that I received my diagnosis via a phone call. So he called me and told me, yes, it is MS, my neurologist, and that we need to start treatment right away. Why the phone call is because we started having a lockdown here in Vienna. So I was officially diagnosed via phone call during the first week of the lockdown in Vienna.
Okay. But that gives an explanation. So it was not that the doctor was somebody who wanted to have such a distance. It was due to the lockdown.
No, not at all.
Okay. And you already mentioned it was your worst relapse so far. So that means you had symptoms before. Since when? Can you count that back?
Yes. So looking back, I have had MS symptoms since I was 12 years old. Okay. I was living back in Guatemala, and one of my first symptoms were actually cramps on my left side of the body and my face, like really, really hurtful cramps. Like when I was very actively playing volleyball, and I remember thinking that maybe I hurt myself or I didn't warm up or stretched before starting to play, but the cramps would come and go. Very hurtful cramps would come and go, and since they would go, I didn't know how to describe it. It's not something that you can see or kind of physically describe, or I don't know. So my parents took me to the doctor, and they said it was stress. We saw many doctors, and they were actually always saying that it was stress, because I did not have any physical symptoms to kind of take care of, so to say. So I had my first symptoms when I was 12 years old, and I've had many different symptoms throughout my years. And now looking back, I can honestly say that I have signs of MS all this time. And during this time, I've also had at least 5 relapses.
Okay.
During my studies here in Vienna, for example, when I was finishing my master's, the first year that I was here in Vienna, I was going through a rough phase of adapting and coming to a new country. And that was the first relapse that I remember as a relapse, with the whole symptom spectrum, with the whole way that I was feeling. So yeah, that was my first one. The second one was during my master's. I had another in between, but I always kind of skipped them. I didn't know what to do about them. I knew that they would come and go, so I never really took them seriously, because any doctor took me seriously. They would, every time I would go there, they would tell me it's stress. And it was only until I was finishing the master's that I went to see a private neurologist. Someone suggested me to see a neurologist because vertigo comes from the head. Yeah. So they told me maybe you should go and see a neurologist. I went privately because I was a student and I could not afford. I was insured through my father back then, and the insurance was a bit odd. So you needed to pay in advance for the treatment, and then you would get the money back. And it was a bit too much. Like, if you have seen your bills, you would know that MS or any chronic illness is very expensive. Yeah. So my father was a bit scared about that. And I, as a student, I was scared too, because I could not afford that amount of money or that treatment. And also MS has different tests and tests to go through. So each test was very expensive. And I decided to postpone that and to postpone my diagnosis, even though I went to see this neurologist privately. And he explained the whole procedure, and I told him, I don't have the money to go through this. So I will come back when I have a full-time job, and I'm fully insured. And I did so. And it turns out that the doctor that I went to see back then was the same one that I saw after years of having postponed my diagnosis. And I stuck with him because he was the first one to take me seriously.
Okay. I mean, good thing that he took you seriously, bad thing that it was due to money that you had to postpone your diagnosis.
Exactly.
But interesting, and thanks for sharing that. How were you feeling about the diagnosis, and what was it like for your loved ones, for your mom and dad, for your boyfriend?
Yeah, so at the beginning, to be honest, I was relieved. I was very happy to finally put a name to my symptoms. It had been years and years since I had symptoms, like weird symptoms that you cannot describe or physically see, that I was just happy. But this blindsided me, I would say. I felt blindsided by my diagnosis because I thought, okay, now I have a name. This will stop, like my symptoms will stop because now I finally have a way to treat them. And I didn't take the time to realize what it means to have MS or to kind of have a chronic condition. And my sister has a background in healthcare, and she used to work with MS patients. And she was the first one to mention MS in my life. She brought MS to my life. She told me she told me what it was like to have MS for these people, and I related with them immediately. And she told me that she did not wish that on myself. And I'm like, yeah, I don't wish that for myself either. But it sounds so familiar. Maybe this is what I've been experiencing this whole time. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, somehow I related to them. And so she was the first one to mention MS. And since she's the one who has a closer relationship to MS patients, I really trust her when it comes to MS and when it comes to how to proceed with this, especially during the diagnosis. The second person who I always mention that has been with me during this whole process is my boyfriend. We are soon to be married, so my soon-to-be husband. He has been with me during the whole procedure of lumbar puncture, MRIs, blood tests. He was with me actually during the first time I went to see this neurologist, and we spoke about what it could possibly mean for me. And I'm pretty sure that it must be hard on him on so many levels, but he's a very kind person, a very, very positive person, and he will never, never let me see a tear or see a doubt. He will always say that no matter what, we will get through it. So I'm very, very grateful for him and for my sisters. And I'm also grateful for having such a great support system. I'm pretty sure it must be hard for everybody, but I think that since my diagnosis, we all have found new balance within our lives, and they really respect my newfound boundaries. So I'm very happy about them.
Sounds great. Yes, especially that your boyfriend is giving you so much backup and love and unconditional love.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. And congratulations for your soon to be marriage.
Thank you. We're so excited. It's going to be in August. So yeah.
Great. So when our podcast will be published, you are married already.
Probably, yeah. I'm going to be a married lady.
Fantastic. Did you receive any recommendations for disease-modifying therapies at the beginning, and what was your decision?
Yes, I received a lot of them. My neurologist went through a list with me of the possible medications that I could take. The thing is that I've had MS probably since I was 12 years old, but the diagnosis was only in 2020. So what he suggested was to start with the mildest one, because this is the way it works here in Austria. You start with one treatment and then you scale up, so to say. Okay. And to be honest, since I was so overwhelmed, I just took it. I took the first one that he suggested because it fitted my lifestyle. Back then, I could not imagine myself going back and forth to the hospital. Like I wouldn't want to go every 3 months to the hospital. So I just said, yes, whatever, this fits my lifestyle. So I'm going to take this. And yeah, that's how I started with my medication now.
Okay. And have you had any change in therapy? And if so, for what reason?
No, not so far. So this year I had a minor relapse. It was a sensational relapse, so to say. So I was having numbness in one side of the body that I did not have before. So it was a tiny relapse, and it was suggested to me that I might change therapies. However, since it wasn't a relapse in the scale that I've had before, then this means the therapy that I'm having now is working fine. So we are kind of seeing how my MS is developing further. in order to see whether I should stick with this medication I have now or change to a different one.
Okay. I mean, of course, this whole, let's say, outside of Germany world will open up to me now with the podcast. I only know from the recommendations given by ACTRIMS that if you have activity under MRI or even a relapse, normally I would recommend to increase the level of medication just for the outside.
Yeah. And this is how it functions here in Austria. But I've heard from the groups that I created and from the people that I've been networking with, it's totally different depending on the country. Mm-hmm. And some people would prefer to start very hardcore right away. But for me, this was the option I had. I think I'm fine with it because honestly, since this is the first time I have a official diagnosis, we cannot really say how the process is or how the progress is going. So I think I'm okay with starting with the mild one and scaling up if it's needed. Like I said, it was a minor relapse, so they are hoping that it won't cause any after effects or aftermath or anything. So yeah, let's see about that. I'm hoping.
Okay. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Are you using any symptomatic therapies? And if yes, which ones?
Not really, not any. I'm using my medications, my daily medications. My disease modifying therapy, and I also do a lot of vitamin D and a lot of supplements, but that's basically it.
Okay, no physiotherapists, no things like that. Yeah. How did you adjust your lifestyle after diagnosis, if so?
I did adapt my lifestyle a lot. Like I would say that I reanalyzed my whole life after the diagnosis. After I finally had some time to chew the whole information, because like I mentioned before, it wasn't immediately. I went through a period of grief, so to say, after realizing that I need to adapt my life. But one of the things that I did was cutting down any stressors, especially at work. For me, work has been pretty much related to a lot of stress. So I decided to take a career hiatus and focus on what was important to me at this moment, especially kind of going back to my roots and going back to tiny things that make me happy. So that was one of the adaptations that I did since my diagnosis. The other thing was to kind of put things into perspective and see where I was investing my energy in. I think that the diagnosis made me realize that I was putting too much energies into the wrong places. And so I started focusing on myself. Like I went to therapy. I started analyzing what was important to me, what I wanted to be focusing within the next years of my life. And I went back to drawing and creating, dancing, writing, all that little things that we take for granted. So I think that MS has impacted my life on so many levels that it's impossible to count them. But it's a positive change that it has made in my life.
That's good. Yes, there's normally always one good thing, or let's say here many good things. Yeah. And I'm glad, you went back to all these things that make you happy.
Yeah.
What do you think about your future, and have your professional and private plans changed? I mean, you said you take a break with normal work.
Mm-hmm. I think about the future a lot. But the thing is that with MS, you also have anxiety, right? So they come hand in hand. So I think about the future just enough that it keeps my anxiety quiet. And the plans I have for the future is just simply focusing on what I can control right now, on the little things, on doing more things for myself every day, on gratitude, on relaxing and taking more breaks. And when it comes to a career, I don't know where I'm going with that. I mean, I have put my communications and marketing background into use for a better purpose. So yeah, I'm hoping that somehow I can manage to kind of, I don't know, like invest my time in a more sustainable way and a better way that fits my current situation and my MS.
Sounds good. Can you explain to us what was your rock bottom with multiple sclerosis, and how did your fight how did you find your way back out of this?
So I hit rock bottom 2 years ago. Unfortunately, it was a period of my life where I had a lot of things going on at the same time. So I would say it was around 2020, 2021. I was having second thoughts with my career. I was also having a lot of private issues with my family. And of course, we got engaged with my boyfriend. So that was also something to consider in the future. So it was a lot of things going on, positive but negative as well. And my diagnosis was one of those things. And it was an overwhelming time for me. So I fell into a hole of depression and anxiety. I was having real psychosomatic symptoms. Is that the word in English?
Yeah, I think so.
The word, yeah, I think so. So I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of chest pains, a lot of insomnia, a lot of I was not relaxed. I was quite the opposite of relaxed. And I think that was my rock bottom. And it was the time where I started noticing that MS really impacts your life in many, many different levels. And I hadn't realized that. I hadn't processed it. I hadn't processed the diagnosis, what it meant for me. I hadn't kind of analyzed what I had been able to do so far and I wouldn't be able to do in the future. So yeah, I think the first step into getting out of this black hole was accepting that I wasn't doing well. Mm-hmm. I was no longer putting a brave face. I was basically crying every day. So I decided that it was time for me to get help, professional help. So I took hands into the matter and started seeing a therapist. An online one, because unfortunately here in Austria we don't have ones speaking Spanish. So I really took into I started researching and I found an online therapist. And that was the first step out of this uncomfortable situation. I also kind of started asking for help within my support group because I'm this person, or I used to be this person where I would deal with things the wrong way, or basically not deal with them. I would just simply get the bad news and say okay, it's part of life. Let's get over it. We don't need to talk about it. It's just, whatever. It's going to go eventually. It's going to pass. And I don't think that's the right way to go, to be honest. It's, you should give yourself time to process whatever's coming your way. And so, I started asking for help around my people. I asked for help. I asked my boyfriend for help to support me more in this phase. And the same with my sisters. They were really backing me up during this whole time. The second thing I did, or the third thing I did already, was focusing on what I wanted to do after this. What was important right now. And like I mentioned earlier, going back to my roots was one of the things that helped me get through this horrible or kind of deep depression, which was like dancing, writing, painting, drawing, everything that had made me happy before, and that I know that I was doing too little of. So I think that was something that really helped me as well.
Great. Yeah. And I think doing all these creative things can totally help to digest different problems and maybe, I don't know, get some distraction, but then again, concentrate on them in order to digest a bit more of it. So at the end, hopefully you get over the situation, but not by ignoring, but by really taking it piece by piece in a way that is doable.
Yes, exactly. And as a creative person, I think that I've known my whole life that I'm a creative person, but I wasn't really being creative in my day-to-day life. I was just focusing on work and school and always doing the best and great and whatever. And I wasn't doing those little things that I knew that were part of me. And through creativity, and I'm pretty sure that you can relate to that, you can also express things that are not easy to express in words. So basically drawing and painting is how I my form of therapy, I would say.
Absolutely. And if the listeners will check your Instagram account, the one where you are concentrating on illustrations, I think they can easily see how you were expressing what was going on.
Yeah.
Let's come to the topic of your International MS community in Austria. Why did you create these International MS Community Austria, and who can become a member?
Yeah. So long story short, when I was diagnosed in 2020, I went through a list of people who could help me out during this whole process. Like for me as a patient, it was the first time hearing about multiple sclerosis from a doctor's perspective. And it was just so random and too much information that I was recommended to join the MS Society here in Vienna. And I did so. Like all of a sudden, I became a member of a society I've never heard in my whole life. And it was a bit weird, to be honest, because you never expect to be in this situation. But yeah, I took the chance. I know that they offer a lot of help to many people, to newly diagnosed people. So I took my chances. However, unfortunately, I did not see myself represented in the information they were putting out there or the programs that they were offering for newly diagnosed people. Simply because I'm an international person. I was born in Nicaragua. I mentioned that already. But I also have an Austrian side of my family, which is also part of my life. So for me, I would never describe myself as an Austrian, but rather as a person who has two different backgrounds or come from two different countries. And I grew up in a third country. So I'm a third culture kid who lives here in Austria. And I was thinking that I cannot be the only one with an international background living with MS in Vienna. And, but like I said, I did not see myself represented in the information they were putting out there. I was a bit shocked by the lack of diversity and inclusion in the spectrum of minority representation. Like there's a lack of inclusion of younger people like myself, or even international people like myself again. So I was thinking that they are a society representing the whole MS community. So where is diversity? Where is this part of the MS community? And like I mentioned before, I was thinking I cannot be the only one. So I put my background, communications background into use again. And I started a Facebook group for international people living with multiple sclerosis in Austria, simply because I know that we have different challenges than Austrians, or than, locals. For once, some of us don't speak German. I do, but some international people don't speak German. So there's a language barrier when it comes to going into the doctors, for example. Also, there's a lot of, I've heard a lot of stories about discrimination within the healthcare system. And we also face different challenges when it comes to even acquiring social security or an insurance, because some of us need a visa to be here. Some of us came here with a partner, for example. But we still want to be part of this society, right? The most of us, we are working, we are providing for Austria. We are also part of the economy. So it's important to us, for us to be included in the conversation. And again, I didn't see this representation in my MS community or in my MS society. And I thought we needed to create a space for that. And if there's not a space for it, then create it yourself. This is my life motto. If you have the knowledge or if you have the initiative, then it's a bit easier to create something by yourself. So yeah, that's basically it. I started my own Facebook group. Now we grew into being an active group of, I don't know, like on WhatsApp, we are like 20 active people, maybe. And on social media, we have a lot of followers, internationally, because of course, social media is broad, so everybody can join us. But this already shows that there's an interest, and then there's actually a group of international people living with MS in Austria.
Yeah. And I mean, just the start of our interview where you told you had to postpone your diagnosis due to financial things. I think financial aspects play quite a big role when you are not from that country and you are out of the system or not even a part really. And when it comes to explaining such a very complex disease like multiple sclerosis, and you don't speak the language perfect I think there are other issues. I can imagine there are a lot of issues. Yeah. And please, to the outside world who is listening to us, if you are living not in Austria, but in another country where you are a foreigner, maybe get in contact with Tania and ask how you can start such a community in your country where you are living, if it is not existing yet, and maybe do the same concept to help you out, but help other people like you are out. And that would be great if the idea could spread out.
Yeah, no, definitely. I always imagine that if I ever leave Austria, I will do it all over again, because I think that, especially like within my network, I was actually talking to a person that comes from Greece but lives in Brussels, and she was saying, I've never thought of that. Like, it makes sense. I'm a foreigner and I still need to have access to healthcare, especially the MS community. Yes. Yeah. Why not? Like, I really opened up her eyes and her mind to kind of starting this group. So yeah, thank you for the call to action, because I think definitely this is something that we can replicate in other countries.
Absolutely. How are you trying to soften the image that MS is a disease of Caucasian Europeans, and that instead it can affect anyone worldwide?
Yes. So it's definitely not just a European chronic condition. I think that by simply coming together as a group here in Austria, we have shown that it doesn't matter where you come from or what kind of skin tone you have or what social background you have. MS does not discriminate. And MS is in fact as diverse as people living with it. We're totally different people, regardless of our background or history, but we're still facing the same challenges or very similar challenges. So, for example, in my case, like I mentioned before, I come from Nicaragua, and I know that in my country, I wouldn't be able to have access to medications or access to healthcare, let alone a diagnosis. I think it's super difficult to get a diagnosis in Latin America. However, I'm still affected by it. So it shows that even though we don't have the same tools, resources, or data around MS, it still exists in different countries. And it just happens that I left my home country to come to live to a third country, and I live with MS. Regardless, I think that if I had stayed in my country, I would probably live with MS as well. But it doesn't mean that because I'm here in Europe, it's now I'm affected. I just think it's part of my genetics or whatever. We still don't know what causes MS, but I'm pretty sure that regardless of my skin tone, my social background, my language knowledge, that I'm affected by MS. So again, it's important to include people from different backgrounds in the conversations and research and the MS community in general.
Yeah, for studies, it's so important to include everybody to get really ideas how medication is working, and maybe if there are some differences or not. And for the doctors that they consider that it could be MS, even so it's not a white 20 to 40-year-old lady. I mean, it's the same for men. Sometimes it can be even an issue when you are a man, because doctors often think of just ladies.
Yeah, definitely. Think this is an important factor, but also the fact that many research are or in general the healthcare is often using the male Caucasian as a role patient, or how to say, as a prototype for a patient. This is a different conversation, I know, but it's also really important for the MS community and for the MS healthcare or stakeholders to acknowledge that we have different personas from different backgrounds, from different genders, from different whatever, from different backgrounds. So please include us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are doing some of these, getting awareness for that fact at the European MS platform, Young People Network. Yeah. What is that platform, and what role do you play in that network?
Yeah, so the MSP, the European MS platform, basically is the umbrella society for all European societies. They work together and they try to do as much as they can within MS research, within MS data collecting, and they even have different projects to promote the well-being of people living with multiple sclerosis. One of their projects is the Young People's Network, which, as the name says, is meant for young people between the ages of 18 and 35 who want to play an active role within their MS societies, within their MS communities, or have their own projects like myself. Mm-hmm. So what we basically do is we advocate for ourselves. We are all MS patients. We are all young people because then again, and young people have different needs than older people with MS. And what we do is to simply create awareness around MS. We go out, visit different countries. Just in June, we were in Strasbourg at the European Youth event, where we put multiple sclerosis center stage. And we kind of provided a space to talk about healthcare security and how climate impacts people living with MS, for example. So yeah, we're young advocates who want to create an impact and really work towards building a better future for young people living with multiple sclerosis.
Very good. Great. Yes. And they are the mid-old ones like me. 42.
Yeah, I'm already 30, turning 35 within a few years. But I always say, as long as you're young by heart, you will always be young.
I'm just kidding. Just having fun. Where can interested listeners find more about that network?
Well, definitely on social media. So there's a group called EU Youth MS, if I'm not wrong, but there's also the European MS platform website where they can get in touch with the people working on that platform. They're super lovely people. I'm so happy to have them in my life, to be honest, and to have found this this platform. And they are open to any questions or to new members. They will right away inform you on what is needed to join our network.
Great. And I put the link in the show notes and the blog, so you can just click there and go to that website if you don't know it or if you don't find it via a search engine. Let's come to your illustrations, which I really like, by the way. You have that name Army of Ants for that account. What can people find on your Army of Ants profile on Instagram?
Yeah. So basically, Army of Ants is my MS diary on Instagram. And the reason why it's called Army of Ants is because at the beginning, I had troubles explaining my symptoms. You know, as a person living with MS, there's so many symptoms that they're just super difficult to explain. And one of the things I would always say when I would go to a doctor's would be that I was feeling like an army of ants was crawling all over me. This was the way I wanted to explain my numbness, because people could not see it, right? So I thought that maybe using funny words or descriptive ways of explaining the symptoms that they would understand. And then I started thinking maybe if I kind of drew them a little animation or a little something, they would understand it better. Because in Latin America, we can be very sarcastic. And when people don't understand us, we normally say, te lo dibujo para que entiendas, which basically means I will draw it so that you understand it better. And that's what I'm doing. It's my way of drawing my symptoms so that people can understand what it's like to live with multiple sclerosis.
Okay. Yeah. And they are really nice. They are friendly looking, and everybody who has MS can totally understand what it means. Yeah. But for the other ones, hopefully it helps to get how it feels. How do the illustrations around MS help you to better get along with your disease?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that for me, drawing is a sort of my kind of therapy, because this whole project actually started with a conversation I had with my therapist, where she was trying to kind of make me think of the things that make me happy, because I was in a very dark place in my life and I didn't see any colors, literally. If you have ever gone through depression, one of the symptoms is that you cannot see colors, like everything is gray. So she was telling me what is something that would make you happy again, or what is something that would bring some colors and joy into your life. And I was thinking drawing. I always like to draw. As a kid, I would tell my teachers that I wanted to become an artist. I actually had plans of becoming a graphic designer in my life, but life had other plans for me, and that didn't turn out. And I was thinking, okay, that's basically it. I like to draw. I've always drawn with watercolors or painted with watercolor. And then I started trying out digital painting. And this is how it came up. I wouldn't say I'm an artist. I wouldn't say I'm good at it. I'm just doing it for myself. And I think this is the way I am processing my MS. This is the way I am explaining my symptoms when it gets difficult to explain. And it just gives me joy. And it's a plus that people can relate. I've met so many people through social media, and especially through my drawings. And yeah, like you mentioned, many of them relate to them and to my drawings and my illustrations. And they're always super happy that someone can visualize the whole symptomatic.
Absolutely. Okay, let's come to your wishes and goals. Have you got a big unfulfilled wish?
I'm working towards being less afraid to leave. So my biggest wish is to not longer be afraid to leave.
Yeah, that's a very understandable wish, and I hope you will get to that point rather soon.
Yeah, definitely.
What development would you like to see in the field of multiple sclerosis in the next 5 years?
Yeah, so the first thing that my neurologist told me when I was diagnosed was that I will live to see the day for a cure. So I'm really putting my hopes to see a cure for MS.
Okay, not in the next 5 years, probably, yeah. But I think so too. I mean, you are even a bit younger than me, and I think I will see that one.
Yeah, let's say in the next 10 to 15 years. But 5 years is a short amount of time. To be honest, I haven't thought about that.
Totally fine. It's fine. You can give different answers. People did that before on the German podcast. Now let's come to the quick fire question and answer sessions. What was the best advice you ever received?
To listen to my intuition and stay true to myself.
Mm-hmm. Very good one. What is your current mantra in life?
To do more things that make me happy.
Good as well. What person would you love to have a fireside chat with, and on what topic?
Emma Watson, simply because I'm a Harry Potter freak. And she's a very admirable person. I would love to talk about feminism, about life, and of course, Hermione Granger.
Mm-hmm. Complete the sentence. For me, multiple sclerosis is?
A full-time job, a never-ending story, but also a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. I mean, you found at least back to all your creative things, and that's a good one. Which website can you recommend on the topic of MS?
When I was diagnosed, the first website I stumbled upon was shift.ms, which is basically a forum, a community based in England, but they do a lot of content around MS in a very creative way and a very millennial way. And I think that was the first time that I could relate to the community or to anyone else having MS. I think that website opened up a whole world for me, because back then I thought I was the only one experiencing these weird symptoms. And then as soon as I had a name, I was like, whoa, there's a whole community around multiple sclerosis. So definitely shift.ms.
Very good. Yeah. And it always feels better when you think you are not the only one. There are other people out there who understand you, who maybe experience things and got good tips to overcome or to live with such things. It always helps. Which book or audiobook that you have recently read or listened to can you recommend, and what is it about?
Well, definitely MS-Perspektive. I think that you're doing a great job here. So that one. And as a book, I would say that maybe you should talk to someone by Lori Gottlieb is one book that helped me get through my depression. It's about a therapist visiting therapy, mm-hmm. and also this therapist talking about her own patients, their story, how they went through therapy, and how actually therapy helps. She explains how the whole process of therapy and the whole kind of mind shifting that happens within every patient. And for me, this book is for everybody who is scared to go to therapy, because this puts things into perspective, and it's also very human and very honest. It tells the story of different people, but also what I got out of the book is that the work depends on everyone's situation. So it's out to you to do the work, to get through your trauma, to get through the process, to really be brave to kind of deal with what you're going through. So definitely that one.
Sounds very good. And yes, I really am a big fan of psychotherapy in whatever way. I mean, there are different ways, or you can do it by your own with creativity or whatsoever. But please concentrate on your issues and try to work on them and overcome them, or I don't know, get adjusted, whatsoever. But look at them and don't try to hide them in a dark room, because they will get more and more power over you, and that's not good. Yeah. Not good at all. Do you have any advice you would give to your younger self for the timing of diagnosis?
Definitely do it sooner. So basically don't postpone your diagnosis, because at that time before my diagnosis, or even going through the diagnosis process, I was scared the whole time. Regardless, what kept me going was to actually put a name to my symptoms. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that I had experienced this for so long, I was kind of gaslighting my own self, to be honest. I was ignoring them, and I was always sure that they will pass. So I never took it seriously. And I think that's my biggest MS regret, so to say, like to have postponed my diagnosis for so long.
Yeah. How and where can interested people find you and everything you do online?
Yeah, so basically I'm everywhere around Instagram. If you want to catch my illustrations, then definitely try and look for me as Army of Ants all together. And if you want to follow the International MS community in Austria, then try and search ms.international.at. If you're an Austrian living with multiple sclerosis in Austria, So basically, if you want to join our group, you can always follow us. And if you want to get a glimpse of my private life, then Tanias Room is my private account.
And of course, I will link all these accounts. And maybe just one question. Is that Facebook group still active? And should people go to bed?
Yes. Okay. The MS International Community has a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, and an Instagram channel. The WhatsApp and the Facebook are for actual patients, because we also want to include other stakeholders, or also caregivers, or people from the support system of these patients. But of course, as a person experiencing MS on a daily basis, we have different conversations and needs, and that's why the Facebook group and the WhatsApp group are private, but the other ones are open.
Okay, great. Is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners, Tania?
I think I've shared my whole life here.
More or less, yes. And thanks for that openness.
No, I'm very happy that you brought up about creating these groups in different countries. Why not? If I can inspire people, and if they want to get in touch to kind of find out how I started, then please do so. I think it's super important to open up the conversation about diversity beyond the ability and disability spectrum, the inclusion of minority groups within the MS community. So thank you for this space, and also for bringing up that topic.
Okay, great. Tania, I hope we will see each other at one point in the future directly. Not just in a digital way, but even so, it's a pleasure, and good luck for you. And I of course will follow all your nice accounts. And I hope by now that the podcast is published, you had a wonderful marriage. And all the best to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the interview and learned something new. And maybe you want to start your own international community, or want to become a part of the MS International Austria. By the way, next time I will talk about the different types of MS. So starting from RIS and CIS, radiologically or clinically isolated syndrome, to RRMS, relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, to the progressive states of MS, so the primary progressive MS and secondary progressive MS, and why lots of experts are not really willing to use this kind of schemata anymore. So please tune in, and remember, I would love to hear from you, as it makes it more of a conversation. So please send me some pictures where you listen to the podcast, or send me some feedback. topics you would like to know more about and things like that. And I would highly appreciate if you can rate the podcast on whatever platform you are listening to it or recommend it to other people who might be interested in the content. So bye for now and hear you next time. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You may also be interested in the previously published episodes and posts, which you can find at ms-perspektive.com/podcast. Perspective with a K. You can also get a free PDF with 11 tips for your positive impact on MS at ms-perspektive.com/newsletter. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach me at nele@ms-perspektive.com or on social media. See you next time.